to every woman and to every girl maybe out there, right, who's thinking about starting a startup, I think you should really do that. We need more female-led startups out there, and don't let yourself be disencouraged when you hear that female founders get less funding or it's more difficult for them. Our files, the founder files, show right that actually the same amount get funding. Maybe you get a bit less, but still, I think it's great to start a company. It has been for me a very rich experience. And if that's something you consider, I think you should definitely try it.
That is Philipp Omenitsch. He's a former founder and CTO who now builds tools to democratize access to venture capital. And he's my guest on episode 138 of Women Disrupting Tech. Through PitchLeague.ai and the founder files, Philipp has analyzed more than 17,000 pitch decks, trying to understand how fundraising works in practice. In this episode, he shares what the data reveals and what founders often miss. We talk about why fundraising often feels confusing the first time around, how experience shapes outcomes, and what the data does and does not say about female founders and funding. We also explore Philipp's work at Sequel, where he helps professional athletes invest in startups, and how patterns like pay gaps and access to capital show up on the investor side of the table too. So this episode is not about quick fixes. It's about understanding the system you're stepping into, especially if you're raising for the first time. So when you're ready to listen, here's my conversation with Philipp Omenitsch. Philipp Omenitsch, good morning.
Good
Good to
morning.
have you. Let's start with a little bit of background on yourself. You are a VC
Yes.
and you started building SQL and the founder files. Why did you do that?
So I started a couple of companies before, and one of them was in crypto, one of them was in mental health. I was always the technical partner, the CTO.
Mhm.
I also had a marketing agency, a legal tech. And so you can see my interests are very varied, I would say. I can interest myself for multiple different things. And when I sold my last company, Stress Coach, I really was thinking deeply what I wanted to do next. I was strongly considering VC for that reason, because you always learn something new and you're at the forefront of technology. It also is about investing money. Um, but ultimately, I found when I started doing kind of getting into the industry, breaking in, what I found is that I really um, like also building software still. And when I met Alex McDonald, who told me about SQL the first time, I immediately knew that this is what I want to do next, because it combines all the things that interests me. It's about VC investing, it's about building our own software, um, and interacting with athletes. So that was a great combination. But for maybe the listeners to share what SQL is
Yeah.
at this point. SQL is a digital family office for the world's greatest athletes to invest in venture. So what we do is we have around 250 clients right now from all over the sports world, almost every sport, and we go out there and look for startups, great startups, and then we facilitate the investment of our athletes in those startups. Um, Along the way, we also created a lot of educational content for our athletes, and we do host events to bring them together from time to time. And this is what we do at SQL. So
That's cool. So, facilitate the investment. Does that mean that you are sort of a middleman, or have you built a fund that athletes can invest in?
So the classical way to do it would be just to raise a fund, but we want to educate athletes. We want to give them all the tools to succeed in the future.
Mhm.
And that, in our opinion, means letting them make their own decisions. So how we work is we're somewhere in between a fund and a investment platform in terms of how we operate. In order to source the startups, we very much operate like a VC fund. But for the investment process itself, what we do is we have created our own platform, a mobile app, where we create a video about a startup, and
Mhm.
then all the athletes are on this mobile app, and then they can make the investment decisions themselves if they want to invest or not. So in a sense, we are a syndicate, and we take some fees, of course, in between.
Yeah. Okay. And the fees are then used to maintain the app, to source the startups, to host the events
Yes,
and the
precisely.
likes. Okay.
Yes,
Oh, what I read is that with SQL, but also with the founder files, and there's also PitchLeague.ai, you want to democratize access to venture capital. Maybe first, can you highlight all the barriers that are currently in place that make it difficult for founders to access venture capital?
definitely. I think there's quite a few barriers. One is definitely knowledge. It's only after you kind of raised or created a company is that you know most of the things that are useful to know. Uh, and that is also the reason that why you see, and we have this in the funnels. I'll get to that a bit in a bit. Um, Exited founder or serial entrepreneurs have it much easier to raise money if
Hmm.
they already did it once before. Secondly, there is also a bit of a, I would say, network barrier. So if
Hmm.
you don't know the right people, if you don't know anyone in the network of VC, it's a bit tough to break into. Um, but also there's, I would say, like a lot of capital chasing very specific types of businesses. Uh,
Hmm.
many founders don't know that. So a startup, I would say, if you ask a VC what is a startup they would invest in, they would say, "Oh yeah, we invest kind of in anything," but it's not true. Um, they are most of the time looking for very high margin, ideally software-enabled, scalable businesses that can produce outsized outcomes. In order to understand that, you need to understand how a fund works, or VC funds work, um, and usually they will make up to between 20 and 50 investments, and every single investment has to be able to return their fund. And in order for the math to work out, that really means they need to invest at a low valuation, and the company has to get really, really big, so they can do that.
Yeah. So all the companies that they invest in actually have to get the fund to return, and that usually is like they have to grow 10x minimum.
Yes, it depends a bit on when a VC invests at which stage, right? So I would say the 10x is more for maybe Series A or Series B, probably
Hmm.
more Series B investors. But if you invest at seed or pre-seed, so at the earliest stages, where there's also the mass startups, right? Because most people startups are very small
Hmm.
in the beginning. Um, then for this math to work out, they have to do like 100 or 1,000 x of.
So how does this play out across gender? I was just curious. Is it more difficult for? It's already difficult for founders, regardless of gender, to really understand what is going on in venture capital, to understand how funds work, if they if investors are the right stage for you, even. Um, but do you see that from your own experience? Is that more difficult for female founders, or doesn't it really matter?
Um, well, we can look at the data in the founder files a bit maybe first, and then we can try to seek for explanations of the data. That's how I usually like to look at problems or questions like that, right? Ideally, we can find some data and then try to make our hypothesis. Um, but maybe first, in order to do that, I should tell a bit more about the founder files.
So let's go there first. What the founder files are, because
Yes,
I found them really useful.
thank you. So yeah, the founder files is basically the culmination of our work over the last 3 years
Hmm.
um, in terms of providing tools to founders. So when we started SQL, one of the first things we did was we asked ourselves, how can we provide founders, right? We were like the new investor on the block. How can we make a name for ourselves, especially with founders of startups? How can we help them? How can we position ourselves also as a maybe something a bit different than a typical VC? And one of the ways to do this was to build our own product. And that is how PitchLeague.ai came alive. A website where you upload your pitch deck, and then we take this pitch deck, analyze it, score it, and give you some actionable feedback on each slide on how you can improve that pitch deck. And as you maybe saw from the founder files, right, this became quite successful. It's one of the top pitch deck analysis websites right now. And over the last 3 years, we're able to get more than 17,000 pitch decks from that website. And yeah, the founder files is basically the analysis of all those pitch decks over the years. Use AI and ChatGPT to extract certain features, trying to um, really compare and look at different statistics across all those 17,000, which is a big, really big data set. It's at least the largest in Europe collection, but maybe even in the world. Such analysis that has been done so far. At least
And that is public.
at that depth, yes. So there have been some analysis of more pitch decks, but I think our report is more than 50 pages long. You can find it on founderfiles.sequel.co, and it really contains a lot of insights, and we've worked on it for 3 months, so
Yeah.
this is the founder files.
Yeah, and as I said, it's really helpful also for founders who are listening. It's definitely a great way to get started on getting feedback on your pitch before you start talking to investors, because there's really a wealth of information that you can get from PitchLeague.ai and from the founder files on most common, let's say, made mistakes, but also what things to emphasize, what things to de-emphasize in your pitch deck, maybe even.
Yes, completely agree.
Yeah. So back to my original question. Do female founders, if you look at the founder files in your own research, do female founders have a disadvantage when it comes to, let's say, the network or the knowledge that they have compared to male founders, or is that similar?
Well, that's, I think, a very, very difficult question to answer, right? Because it's difficult to know what somebody knows, especially at scale and in the market. But if you look, I'm happy to cite some of the statistics that
Yeah,
we found in the founder files just by looking at the data, right?
yeah.
And so when we look at this data, around 18% of startup founders are female, compared to 81% who are male, right? This is quite a drastic difference already. So it's also not surprising that so we also looked at the startups that then get funded.
Mm-hmm.
And in those startups, this ratio actually stays quite the same. So um, in the funded startups, from the text we looked at, the 17,000, 80% had male founders and 20% had female founders. So you can see, like, it's roughly the same likelihood of startups with female founders getting funded,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was actually quite a bit surprising to me because I always thought it's less, right? Because everybody talks about females or female founders having kind of a more difficult time to raise. At least what our data says, this doesn't have to be the case for everyone individually, or there's for sure geographic differences.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, Our data actually says that this is not the case.
That's good to hear. Yeah, because we discussed some data up front, also on how much female founders secure in terms of funding. We all know the 2% statistic, that female founders or female-led, female-only founded startups get 2% of the funding, because that's the correct number. Um, what I read in your data was that female-led startups secured a median of 836,000 US dollars, and men comparatively did raise more, but only, quote unquote, 1 million. as a median number.
Yeah, so it's 16% less for female. That is quite interesting, and it definitely is some difference in the data.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, correct. I also like you asked the question, right? What could be the reason for that? And what we also found in our data talked about this a bit earlier about the unfair advantages
Mhm.
and what makes it easier to raise in general. And in my opinion, that is when you have already had prior startup experience or sold a company. And so if we look at this data, we see that only 30% of female founders in our data set had prior startup experience.
Mhm.
44% of male founders had. So you can see a bit of a kind of less experience in working in startups before that. This could potentially be one explanation
Yeah.
because when we looked at the data also of the median raised funds
Mhm.
across all startups, the previous founder experience was one of the most correlated factors for raising larger rounds, right? So this would be one, I think, quite highly likely attribute to explain that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
also
That's
saw that only 8% of female founders had a prior exit experience compared to 16% of male founders. So this is half of the amount, right? Again, like this could explain this. I'm not saying this is 100% the case, but it could be a good explanation.
Yes, because especially prior exit experiences, let's say, is makes startup very attractive, and also you already have the network then to start talking to investors. So it's easier. They already know you, and you already, as you said before, you already know what the game is about. So you know how VC funds work and how their financing goes and what's in it for the investor. So it makes it. I guess I'm pretty sure it helps founders if they have prior exit experience or even prior experience.
Yes. There's one more thing actually we found in the data, which is quite a big difference between female and male founders, and that is the technical background. So 59% of female founders had a technical background versus 81% of male founders. Again, at least in our data set, right? And this could be also maybe just maybe women not mentioning it in the pitch deck, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to necessarily be that it's not prevalent. So maybe women just don't tell also about their previous experience or their exits. Maybe they won't want to brag so much. Maybe they're more modest. Um, but this again could be one different explanation because what we saw is that a technical background in the founding team um, increased the chances of raising around also quite a bit.
Yes. So and
You can read the exact number in the founder files because I
yeah.
forgot.
No, no, no worries. We'll include the link to the founder files in the show notes anyway. Yeah. So so I just want to go back a bit on to the investment decisions that venture capitalists generally make because
Mhm.
they have, let's say, not a lot to rely on. So there's like really minimal hard data on uh, profit, loss, turnover, that kind of things. What is the impact of that on the investment decisions that VCs take?
You have to differentiate between like very early stage companies
Huh?
and more late stage companies,
Huh?
right? In a startup that doesn't have a product yet, that's pre-revenue, I completely agree. It's very, very difficult to make a decision based on revenue because there is none.
There's
You you have to almost entirely focus on the team and in the market that people are working on. And many kind of VCs will tell you the same thing, right? It's the founders in the market. But yeah, how do they evaluate founders and how do they evaluate the market?
uh
Um, there's one notion which I quite like is called founder market fit. So why are those founders kind of poised to create a very unique business that's highly successful in this market?
huh.
And often that can be relevant industry expertise, right? So they've worked maybe in the industry for a long time. or they're really obsessed just with that market and this one problem because they maybe have experienced that early on in their lives. They have been struggling with that for a long time, or they're just weird and they really focus on that one problem.
Yeah.
Could all be possible reasons for a good founder market fit. But yeah, so if you go later stage, right, let's say Series A, um, the financials and the revenue, especially the margins, the conversion rates, and all of that, the customer acquisition costs, they play a much bigger role in the decision. But yeah, the founders are still very, very important.
So, one of my own thesis is that if you start investing a lot more, let's say, in diverse founding teams or even female founding teams in the pre-seed stage, that will sort of trickle through to seed because of follow-on investments and Series A. However, from I don't know where I read it, but I think it was PitchBook, that isn't the case. So that does not happen. How did you see that in your data set? Do you track how companies evolve over time?
It's a bit difficult because with Pitch League, we get a lot of early stage pitch decks, right? Like mostly pre-seed, seed, some Series A. Um, and also those companies have only been started maximum 3 years ago. So we don't have any data there yet on many like successful companies because usually they take, as you know, between 5 and 10 years to really get successful.
Hmm.
Um, I think we do have a few, but it wouldn't be statistically significant, you know. So we unfortunately don't just have any data on this in at least in the founder files. It would be interesting to look if the follow-on funding rate for female founded pre-seed companies is higher or lower than
Or
male.
similar?
Could be could be for the founder files next year if
Yeah.
we do a repeat.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always like these little themes because you had a bit of data already on female founders in the report.
Yes.
Do you see it from your discussions? Do you see it become more, let's say, normal to invest in female founders or in founder teams that have women in there?
Well, look, I think if a founder was exceptional, a VC would always invest in women before. I think there was a bit maybe more hesitance in maybe let's say 20 years ago, maybe to invest in female founders. But I don't honestly I have not, at least in my spheres, seen any like how do you say disadvantage of female founders. As a matter of fact, we invested in at least 3 companies ourselves with female founders.
Hmm.
Still is roughly the ratio of 80%, 20%, right?
Hmm.
And we actually do see it as a good thing if the team is diverse.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, women are 50% of the population roughly, right? So to kind of have at least one woman in the founding team or as the startup founder, in my eyes, can only be beneficial. And when working with women in my teams, um, views from other people, it doesn't have to be only women, right? It can be someone from a different religion or someone from a different upbringing background. It always has been beneficial and not um, bad for the business.
No. Do you see that your clients, so the athletes, pay extra attention to this? Because, for instance, one of the Williams sisters, I forgot if it was Serena or her sister, is very vocal about this, about investing, specifically investing in female founders.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we've had some of our athletes ask specifically for also female startups. Um, However, the large majority of our clients is still male, and that has is one reason for this is also the big difference in pay in sports, right? Which there is also quite a lot of progress being made right now. We might have followed, right, the World Cups where the teams demanded the same pay as the men. Um, But yeah, as a matter of fact, it's still the case that the pay gap in sports between women and men is still probably 10x or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, especially in football. In tennis, I think it's pretty similar.
yeah, there were some moves now to adjust the prize money, so it's almost the same, or it's the same for multiple sports. There's definitely been a trend in this. Also, the women's basketball league, right? Uh, with with lots of progress being made there. But yeah, to come back to startup investing, definitely there have been also initiatives to invest only in female founders, um, which I think is good. But ultimately, right, the I think females are already there and they can do it, and there's a lot of role models out there. There's billionaire women who kind of started and sold the companies, um, and it's for every woman to go and find a way.
So on the founder files, how can female founders use the data in there to their advantage?
I think it's interesting, especially also even to look at it before you found a company, maybe to see which factors make it more likely to be funded. It's always difficult to generalize with startups, right? Because what works for the majority might not work for you at all, especially if you are in a very specific industry. Some things might be completely different. But I think the kind of big or obvious trends are that if you have worked in a startup before or have worked in a unicorn before, it's
Hmm.
much easier to get funding
Yeah.
because you kind of have seen that environment already. And you also have most likely the network and connections in that. So if you maybe thinking about starting your own business or going working for someone, if you can work for a Series A company, right, a company that's quickly growing, that could be a very, very good first step before maybe starting your company. Um, because you will learn a lot of things on the way, you will make a lot of connections, and it will be easier for you to start your company later. If you don't have anyone, again, depends on the industry, but if you don't have anyone with a technical background in your team, that's another point where that you should focus on probably. I see quite some teams I come across without a technical co-founder, and they usually always struggle with hiring the right people for the technical team, the tech team, um, and it's just a large advantage I think you have also in terms of being funded.
Why is that? Because nowadays with AI, there's a lot of technical tasks that you can sort of ask AI to do the job.
Yes, for sure, definitely, and I think it's not so much about um, maybe the technical background itself. I know quite some founders who, without really like a formal technical education, have built their own products. I think it's a bit more about the mindset of, oh, I will find someone else to do the technical thing for me. If you want to do it yourself and you don't have any technical background, you have the ambition, the drive to solve it. I think it's definitely much easier to do this nowadays with AI tools than it used to be just 2 or 3 years ago. Um, but it's mostly about being able to really dig into a problem and solve it by yourself. And I think this is something that, especially at the earliest stages, is very difficult to delegate. And it has to be in the founding team. It's the same as with sales, right? Some founders try to delegate sales very early on, and this could only technical founding teams where I see that, where they build a great product and then they don't market it and then they don't sell it, right? And then they fail. They would have someone focused on sales, and they maybe try to hire or work with an agency to sell their product, and it doesn't work out. Again, both of these, it can always work out. I'm just saying how to increase the chances, right?
Yeah, and having a technical co-founder, or if you have a lot of tech people on board but no sales experience, having a salesy or marketing, someone with marketing background on the team will then help you.
Yes. So I mean, especially in the earliest stages, right? I mean, it's all about building your product and talking to users, and talking to users usually means selling.
Yeah, but what I also hear you say is around the capability to attract other people to your idea in terms of finding a co-founder. That's basically what finding a co-founder is about. Making the idea, it's sort of even selling the vision. Let's call it that. And being
Yeah.
able to do that also then shows the capability to a. This is not just one um, idea of one person who may or may not have a good idea, but it's more like, okay, there's more people who think this is a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you start and you convinced your co-founder to join you,
Yeah,
I'd find it also easier to kinda convince an investor to join you, right?
yeah, yeah. And so you've backed a number of female founded startups. What has been your experience with that in terms of do they do things differently or the same? Do they generate more traction or less?
I think the women we've invested in are all extremely, extremely ambitious,
Hmm.
and this is something we look for in every founder we invest in, right? So it's not very surprising. In terms of what they have done differently, I mean, every business we invest is very different. So I haven't honestly seen a clear. Um, Maybe they communicate a bit more. I have a feeling, which I think is quite good. So we do tend to get maybe more communication, investor updates from them. Um, but that's more like a qualitative feeling here or anecdotal evidence rather
Yeah.
than hard data.
No, but it is something that I hear more often that women are just better in terms of communications.
Mhm.
They communicate more often. Basically, that's what they do. So I'm not surprised to hear that that it's your experience as well. Maybe going back to what makes a good pitch deck and what actually gets high, because PitchLeague.ai actually I think scores the pitch decks. What are the components that it scores on? So probably traction will be in there, but
We
and the founder teams you told about you said about having technical people on board or having a diverse founding team also in terms of capabilities. What else?
we really have two main scores. One score is about the pitch deck itself
Hmm.
and just saying, okay, is all the information in there that we would expect to be in there? Is it clear, the information? It's like, is it, yeah, maybe if you have like 1,000 words on a slide, right? It's not so useful. But if you put them, did you put the most important metrics on your slide? Is it also designed nicely, right? It's important for us as well. Because again, like a pitch deck is part of selling.
Hmm.
And then the second large category is more on the startup itself score, and there we look mostly at the team. Have they had any previous startup experience, for example? Do they have a technical co-founder? But then also the traction. Are they growing very quickly? How did they put their revenue in there, and how much is the revenue, and how much is it growing ideally?
Yeah.
And then also the market, is it like a very, very small market these founders are after, or is it like a market that potentially could produce a huge company?
So the thing that I was mostly wondering about is you've built you have a slightly different version of venture capital than your regular fund that most people know. What made the choice for that? Why did you focus on building a syndicate for athletes rather than building a fund?
So our mission really is to give athletes all the tools to be successful
Mhm.
after their careers, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's called sequel, for like what comes next after their career.
Mhm.
And in order to be able to do this properly, we think you have to educate them, right? To make their own decisions. And how do you like let athletes make their own decisions? Well, I mean, through like real investment decisions, right? Every investment that we put on the app, they have to actively make the decision. how much, and in which startups do I invest.
Mhm.
Mm, If they would just be investing in the fund once and then they hear from it 5 years later, there's a completely different level of engagement in that. Uh, they maybe get updates, but it's much more passive than if you have to actively make a decision and we force you to make a decision, right?
Mhm.
So this was one of the key considerations. We also think that athletes are just much more excited about the startups they invest in because they made this decision I want to invest in, and are also maybe more willing to help them down the line, right? Some of the startups we invest in, they definitely can profit from um, having those athletes involved, not only in the fundraising announcements, but what we, for example, also with scan.com, one of our investments, we created a video with one of our athletes to do some advertising for them, to tell stories, right? This is one of our key um, unique value add.
Yeah.
So, and to any startup listening out there, we are your investor if you want to have your story being told with video. We really focus on that, and I think we really excel at it. You can see some of the works definitely on our social media.
Yeah. So does it help to mention the interests of other investors, or maybe even do some name dropping in your pitch deck? Does that increase chances?
Yes, actually, that's one thing we saw as well. So good point. Um, Startups that mentioned already current investors in the decks, uh, or that they kind of starting to get traction with their fundraise, they definitely were much more likely to raise.
How can, because you work with former athletes, how can they help other than, let's say, having their name linked to the startup? How can they help startups?
I think one of the biggest value adds they have is bringing attention to a startup,
Mhm.
and that is not only like through the name, right? They can also talk about it in the media. They have lots of big social media followings, um, but also they can help with coaching, right? They have gone through big challenges in their careers sometimes, and some of those situations may be quite similar to what founders go through in the journey when building a successful company.
Yeah.
We try also to connect them directly with the founders when it makes sense.
Do they, because from a performance point of view, I understand that there's like really, it's really helpful. The former athletes bring a performance mindset that not many have. Um, I was wondering, because those athletes have a specific experience as an athlete, does that also make startups attractive to them? Because the founders, maybe not in terms of the of sports, but are going to similar, let's say, experiences where they really have to show peak performance and do that continuously on a day-to-day basis, really practice their skills on a day-to-day basis on a much higher level than, let's say, your average employee.
So yeah, I mean for sure, like startup founders, I think are very much professionals and high performing professionals
Mm.
indeed. And yeah, there's some similarities, right? It's also about leadership. It's about kind of bringing your peak performance at the right moment. Uh, it's about almost running a marathon sometimes, not giving up, putting in like the work every day of the week, every day of the year, to make sure you kind of have the highest performance, right?
Yeah. And do you also hear that back from the athletes leads that this makes it attractive to them?
Well, in some sense, athletes want to be successful, and I think the athletes we have in Sequel, they really want to start also maybe something new after the end of their careers.
Mm.
And so investing in startups, learning about startups, maybe going along with the journey with founders helps them learn along the way while they're still in their careers to set them up for success after their careers, not only financially by investing in successful companies, but also just by, like it's always how you said, which knowledge or which kind of factors are important to get funding. Uh,
Mhm.
it's about understanding the ecosystem, and I think investing in startup is one of the best way really to understand that ecosystem itself.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the beginning of the interview. You said that you founded or that you actually had a startup called Stress Coach.
Yes,
What are lessons that you take from that experience with Stress Coach that help you today?
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned there was it's not so important. Like it's more important what you work on. Like there's so many things you can do in a startup, right? And you can fill your day with all kinds of things. And of course, you should work hard because that will increase your chances of success. But it's much more important to work hard on the right thing. Um, so, if to give you an example, if a product is already good, right? But we don't have marketing, it's much more important to work on marketing. This is just to make it to simplify it a lot.
Yeah.
And if you don't work on marketing, well, we cannot be successful, right? If we don't have any users. So to really sometimes take a step back and think, analyze what you could be working on, and then choosing the highest impact area, I think that is something I really learned there.
And how does that show in SQL and the founder files? How do you sort of take that from the learning in Stress Coach to what you're
And
doing
look,
now?
the pitch leak and the founder files are something that I would say are not bringing us any revenue today, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but we understand that we need to invest in certain things long term, and I
Hmm.
think is such an investment. And so, how do we approach this? We don't like work on this every day of the week, right? But we build PitchLeague.ai and also the founder files in very dedicated hackathons, which were like just 2 or 3 days each. And I think we created a lot of value. We also made the product very narrow, right? You can just upload a pitch deck, it analyzes, that's it. There's nothing more. There's no monetization. There's no real, I don't know, like we're not working on this product to improve it in terms of adding more features. We're only working it to improve the quality of it from time to time. But so it's a very, I would say, time gap. Maybe we invested, let's say, 15 man days into these products like Found Files and Pitchly. But I think the outcome has been great, right? And it has helped us. But you have to understand that we cannot like invest all of our resources into that because there will be diminishing returns in a
Yeah.
sense. So it's much more important to work on stuff that's directly correlated to helping our business. So that could be maybe one lesson how we directly applied that.
Okay. So really focus on the things that matter and PitchLeague.ai. Although I do think it's a really nice idea,
Yeah, I think so too. And I think
but
we've gotten lots of good feedback from founders who said this has really helped them. We know it's being used in some university courses even to teach startups on how to improve your pitch deck. So yeah, it's definitely a product we're all proud of building.
yeah. So I'm actually building something similar myself, but then focused really on the let's say the idea that PitchLeague.ai has, so that you can upload a pitch deck and get feedback. Um, I was wondering would be functionality that I should include beyond the obvious upload and then getting good feedback part. What would be functionality that I should include to make that tool successful?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, look, if ideally, right, you have founders uploading the pitch deck, their goal is to raise funds. So any way you can actually help them raise those funds would probably provide the most value to those founders. So
Yeah.
uh, suggesting concrete investors you can connect them with, or um, also sending out a newsletter about startups that are raising funds could be something you could do.
Okay, yeah, that's that first one had or is already in the business plan. The second one sort of crossed my mind, but I'll make a note of that one.
Ma Can I say one more thing? Yeah,
You
and
want
to
to?
every woman and to every, girl maybe out there, right, who's thinking about starting a startup, I think, you should really do that. We need more female-led startups out there, um, and don't let yourself be disencouraged when you hear that, female founders get less funding or it's more difficult for them. Um, our files, the founder files show, right, that actually the same amount get startup, get funding. Maybe you get a bit less, but still, I think it's great to start a company. It has been for me very rich experience. And if that's something you consider, I think you should definitely try it.
Yes, and to your point, I think the founder files, but also PitchLeague.ai can give you a lot of uh, knowledge that you should get, let's say, before, well, maybe before you start, or maybe at least early on in your startup career. That can help to build a successful startup,
Yes.
especially also for women and girls. Yeah.
Cool.
So, Philipp Omenitsch, thank you very much for this conversation. Really enjoyed it. If people would like to learn more about PitchLeague.ai, if people would like to try out what's in the founder files, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, I mean, just Google for founder files and SQL, or just go to PitchLeague.ai. Or if you have any questions about the product, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, and I'd be happy to kind of help you through however I can, let's say.
Okay. Well, thank you very much once again. And we'll include those links in the show notes, of course. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, keep being awesome. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to episode 138 of Women Disrupting Tech, titled What Most Founders Learn Too Late About Startup Funding with Philipp Omenitsch. If you want to connect with Philipp or learn more about his work at SQL, PitchLeague.ai, or the founder files, please use the links in the show notes. As usual, you can find those at Women Disrupting Tech and on my Substack. Just click the link in the caption. If you found this episode useful, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if you haven't already, hit the follow or subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you never miss future episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope to see you in the next episode. And until then, as always, keep being awesome.